Welcome to the Photography Business and Pricing Show. It is great to have you here. This is round number 2 as we try to do this again. We had a little audio issue, but of course, those of you who are seeing this didn't know that, probably didn't care. Let's just get right into our topic of the day, and that is talking about separating yourself from the competition. What makes you different than everyone else who has a camera? And it really is a great topic. It's something that we all have to. Thank you for the thumbs up. Yeah, we had the audio issue. Thank you for your help there. And the thing is, we all have something to bring to the table, but there are a few things that a lot of us lean on that we think that is that separation factor that really is not there. It's something that we think, well, we're going to build a business on this and people are come flocking to us. Well, that is not the case. And I'll tell you what that is in a few minutes. But first, before we get into that, I certainly want to welcome those who are here on the live stream, as well as those of you who are catching us on the replay. The replay is where you can certainly ask more questions and share your thoughts about how you can separate yourself from the competition. What makes you different as a photography business? And so I'm going to rehash some of the stuff I shared in the first portion of this that is not being aired because, well, technical difficulty. But that's the last time I'll mention it. Let's just keep moving forward here. Separating yourself from the competition is one thing you need to remember is that you do bring something new to the table, and that is your eye. Nobody has your eye. Nobody has your perspective. And if you think about it like that, then you'll understand it's not about the equipment. Now, there are situations where you can use equipment to your advantage in the sense that you have maybe some expensive lenses. If you're an architect, maybe you have some tilt shift lenses that you can bring to the table. Maybe you have a large production crew. Maybe you have a studio and you can add that to your overall theme compared to maybe other photographers who don't have a studio for specific jobs. That can be something that helps in the overall picture. But the bottom line is if you understand that you bring your own eye to the table, and that is what you're competing on, not the equipment. Anybody can pick up a phone. Anybody can buy a camera and start creating images. But it's the way you frame that image. It's the light. It's the decisions that you make along the way. The fact is that I look at art in general as about the decisions you make. And that's the same for photographers. I mean, you can look at a canvas and say, why that person just painted all red and put a white stripe down the middle, and that's art. Well, they had decisions to make along the way. You may think it's good or bad art. That's up to you. That's your job. But that artist had to decide on the size of the canvas, the colors to use, what brushes to use. And there were many decisions along the way. And the same goes for the photographer. The decisions you make, the eye that you have, that you bring to the table, your way of looking at things or creating things, how well you capture those decisive moments. That's a big part of what we do as photographers is capture decisive moments. But some of us are in studio creating those moments. That's fine, but we all bring something new. So with that, we start to brand who we are. And those of us who are able to continue to build that brand, that reputation, they're the ones who are making a living doing what they love to do versus chasing other people who happen to have equipment too. That is so important. You need to understand that. Now, what is that thing that a lot of people try to bring to the table? In a moment, I'm going to talk about the combination code because I think that's really important. But one of the elements that a lot of times people bring to the table, photographers bring to the table that they think separates them from the competition, they think it's about service. Well, service is important. You do need to follow up with what you promise. I mean, quite honestly, a lot of times just doing that will get you ahead of the game. Doing what you say you would do and following up, that gets you ahead of a lot of people. But the fact is, you just have to have good service. Anybody and everybody should have good service, especially in such a saturated market. If you have horrible service, you're not going to last long just out of default. So you can't develop your branding on service, although there's an asterisk there for that. And you can't build your branding on the things that everybody else can bring to the table. Other people could say you are a great photographer, and that's wonderful. That can be the service element. Other people can tell others that, wow, the service was awesome. And you certainly want to strive to that level. You certainly want to strive to the level in which people are saying, this photographer is incredible. You need to use them, but you can't be the one boasting that. And so that's the caveat there. That's important to understand. Let's talk about the combination code in general. The combination code to separate yourself from the competition is so important, because if you want to make it as a photographer, you need to be able to charge the money that you feel you're worth. And if you go down the photography commodity road, meaning you have a camera, you have a decent eye, you're okay with lighting, you understand the basics, you understand the mechanics of it, and you can take a good image. Well, and then you go for the lowest price because you're not bringing that extra special something new to the table. That's the road a lot of photographers naturally go down, because look, a lot of photographers get into the business because they love photography, not because they want to go into business. But if you want to sustain your business, you have to understand these basic principles. So what do you bring new to the table? Well, you can certainly bring other technologies. You can bring certain styles, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. You can look at best business practices and concepts that maybe are happening cutting edge in other industries and bring it to the photography field. As I knocked out our system last time, I was bringing this up and I was talking about VR and augmented reality. And that's cutting edge. It's something new. A lot of people are involved in it already, a lot of photographers, but there are a lot of new applications for photography that are coming up. And if you start working in those areas, you may have some advantages that can take you well into the future. There's some areas of photography that have never been needed before. And there's some areas of photography that most people can just do themselves, where they used to hire a photographer. I see it all the time. Maybe you have too. But when you combine something more, you separate yourself from the competition in a way that gives you some leverage to increase that price. As I've mentioned a number of times in these shows, that I've met with many photographers, especially right after the recession. There are photographers that come in who had great portfolios and worked all over the world, but they're having trouble. But there are also photographers who were doing just fine because they had what we called an and. We were a photographer, they were a photographer and a writer, photographer and videographer. They had something that they combined to the photography that made them more valuable to the client. And that's what I'm talking about. So when you add something else, again, such as maybe being a designer and a photographer, being able to put a package together, or bringing something new in terms of design, or a new product if you're a retail photographer. What are the latest products? What's hot right now? What's new? What can you combine with your business to stay cutting edge, and maybe even think of new ways to use photography that maybe you have a nice clientele, but you could look at them and say, wow, here's another thing that maybe you could sell to them, another product, another type of service that these folks could be interested in. You can always survey them, talk to them one-on-one, ask them why they hired you, ask them why they came back even better, ask people why they referred you. Sometimes you can find some elements from those questions And when you pull those questions, that maybe you can expand on that, which will help you combine to your business and your brand and your reputation. So the combination code, combining different things to separate yourself from the competition, is so important. But you have to start with that core that I mentioned about, at the very beginning, of understanding and having that confidence that nobody else has your eye. And if you can build off of that, you're going to have a much more successful career, because then there really is no competition. And as I often like to say, and some people like this when I say this, and some people hate it when I say this, but competition is irrelevant today. Competition is irrelevant because there's only one person you should be competing against each year. The growth of your company compared to the company you grew last year. When you can do that and continue to figure out and focus in and dive deep into your company to really look at the things I've just talked about, then you can really make a better company and a stronger company and a growing company. Versus, I mean, I've talked to a number of photographers in the last few weeks who have really been complaining a lot about the competition and what they're doing and how they go about business. And that is never going to end. And you're just going to drive yourself crazy. And believe me, I say this not because I ignore the competition. Of course I notice. Of course I notice when I lose out on an opportunity because somebody was employing some horrible business practice or a client was making a bad decision, hiring the wrong photographer. Even worse, when somebody's portfolio was so much better than mine and they're even more expensive and I lost the job. That's actually, I think that's fine. That's just fine. But it's happened. It has happened. Somebody is always better than you, and there are always people who are not as good as you. But remember, back to your eye. You bring your eye to the table. And sometimes your way of seeing things is not what the client is looking for, and that is okay too. All right. Wow. So that was the core of this conversation about separating yourself from the competition. What makes you different? And there are so many different things. I'm looking forward to seeing in the comments, those of you who have some ideas that what makes you different. What are some of the things you can bring to the table beyond even just photography and writing? Are you a purist? Do you like to say, look, I am a purist. I'm going to be a photographer. I'm not bringing another skill to the table. I'm just going to bring something new to the photography industry alone. And that is what I want to be. And that is who I am. And I'm going to fight it on through. And that's fine. That's fine too. Sometimes you can add other elements. I was just talking with somebody today, and they do a lot of different things within their field. And they're concerned that, when it comes to marketing and developing yourself and developing your business, the concern that if I just take this focus on this one niche, I'm going to lose out on all these other opportunities. And I said, you doesn't mean you have to stop doing those other things. It just has to be the one thing you need to be known for. You need to be known for something. And being known for everything, that's why I focus on the food side of my photography. Get well known for food. Now, I'm known for a few other smaller niches, but when I advertise and when I talk to people, I'm usually talking about the food because that carries with them longer than if I say, hey, I can do pretty much anything, or I photograph people. That's not going to carry with them. I mean, even better would be saying, I photograph desserts. If you can narrow it down more and more and become known, that message will carry much further. And I was just talking about combining, but that's the niche element, right? There are two ways to go about that, right? So, but at the same time, I bring other elements to what I do as a photographer because there are a lot of food photographers too. So I have to, one, present my eye, make sure I'm updating my portfolio on a regular basis, taking a look at that website and making sure that those photographs are the best and the most recent photographs, in that I'm not embarrassed to show that because I haven't updated it. I mean, there are a lot. I've talked to enough photographers, and maybe you have too, or just business people in general, said, yeah, we have a website, but don't go there. It hasn't been updated. It doesn't have all the right information. That's a problem. And it's true for me when I get behind too. That's a problem for me too. I have to make sure, because people are going to check you out. They want to see your eye. They want to see how you present your work and what you do and what experience you have. And they're going to either find you or follow up with your website just to make sure that's your portfolio today. And another conversation that we will have in the near future is about that portfolio and it not being on other platforms. You've got to have your own website today. I was talking with somebody the other day, said, all we just need Facebook. We'll just use Facebook or Instagram, specific. Well, there were two different people. One was saying I need Facebook. The other was saying Instagram, which for photographers is probably the one area. Say, yeah, they'll just check out my Instagram. I get work from Instagram. And so, but that's not your portfolio. And I definitely think that's a good conversation for another time. Okay, I am going to wrap up. I'm looking forward to reading your questions and answering them and getting into this conversation about what can you do. Do you think that the equipment's the most important thing? Do you think it's your creativity? Do you think it's your eye? What is the most important thing to you when developing your business and understanding business and making yourself different than, in quote, the competition? All right. I enjoyed sharing this information. We'll talk to you next Friday, noon Eastern time. And if you have questions that you want me or even topics to get into, put that in the comments, or you can hit me up on Twitter at Rosh Sillars. And I appreciate all of you. This has been a nice community developing up here. Oh, great talk. Thank you. Looking forward to the portfolio talk. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. Thank you for being here on both of the presentations and hearing it a couple times. But yes, and it's always great to have people here. So again, noon Eastern Standard Time on Fridays. Thank you all. We'll talk to you next time.